welcome to Uncommon History. I'm Brian.
And I'm Harold.
Harold, we've got a really big celebration coming up here locally for the Perryville Battlefield in the city of Perryville. It's going to be October the 8th and 9th. It's the 160th celebration.
Right.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about what the celebration's about?
Well, as we all have that have studied history know, and for those that don't, October the 8th, 1862 was when the original Battle of Perryville, the fight for Kentucky, as we know, happened. And every year it's closest to that date, the weekend closest to that date, that we have our anniversary of that and our commemoration of that. And some years are bigger than others. I know the 150th was a huge reenactment at the park. So this year we're going to do the 160th. And I had a meeting last week and found out there's about 1,000 reenactors already signed up to come, and a lot of artillery and horses.
And that's really big to have that many people coming in.
That's a pretty significant battle, yeah. We are also having a lot of things downtown. Brian, I think you and I are going to be set up downtown by we'll be by the new footbridge, unless plans change that we can't foresee, but we'll have our antique engine sit there, and we'll have a table up. We'll have some information about our podcast, and we're also going to be doing some ghost tours this weekend. There's all kind of other events going to go on in town. So if you're interested in history, if you love ghost tours, or if you've never been to the Perryville Battlefield, you need to come. It's going to be something that I think you'll really enjoy.
And if people want to find out more information, they can go to downtownperryville.com, and that'll kind of give them a list of everything that's going on. And if you want to do the History Ghost Walk, try to get into Harold's group, because he's very entertaining, very knowledgeable, and he does a great job on presenting those.
Well, I think all of our guys do. We have three usually, unless somebody can't make it for whatever unforeseen reasons. But the last one that I did, I think we had 95 people there. Of course, I didn't take 95, but right. We had 95 people show up. So it's a really popular thing. And, you know, there's been some type of experience going on with every single one of them. They've caught, they have caught anomalies on their phones and pictures, orbs, all kinds of things that have happened. Just about every single one of them. So it's really interesting.
So basically, the events will be going on in two locations. One out at the park, Perryville Battlefield Park.
Yes. And
then also, downtown, where they'll have food trucks and vendors and just different things kind of going on downtown on Merchants Row and kind of around that area.
Yes, and the reenactments will be out town. They have two this year, one on Saturday, one on Sunday. And they're also doing ghost tours out there.
Right? Oh, okay.
So they're going to do a ghost walk out there as well. So we'll have one, I think, in town. It'll be late, but I think they're having two out there, and I'm not involved with that, but I encourage you to do that too, because the ones that I've done out there, they are really neat. I've enjoyed them.
And so, I mean, there's going to be a lot going on. It'll be a great weekend. The weather's usually great during the first weekend of October. And, you know, kind of get out of the house and come and learn a little bit about history and have fun, and something for the whole family.
Right. Brian, are you ready to do a podcast?
I'm ready. So what's our topic this week?
Now, see, we haven't talked about this.
No, we never talked about this.
You thought that I was going to do something else.
Yeah.
And I changed right at the last minute. I want to tell our listeners and also tell you, the thought process that goes into a podcast is really weird. And sometimes I'm right, and sometimes
at least it is for us.
Yeah.
We can't speak for everybody, but for us.
I'm sure there's some people who agree with me.
Oh, yeah.
But I have a hard time sometimes. You know, I'll get a subject in my head, and I think, oh, boy, that'll be interesting, you know. And I've read some about it and everything, and then I start doing some digging, and it just doesn't go anywhere. You know, it's just not a good story. But, you know, I hope people enjoy this one. My Old Kentucky Home.
My Old Kentucky Home.
Yes, it's a state park, but there's stories there.
And those of us here from Kentucky understand a little bit about the history. So,
what do you think of, Brian, when if somebody said, "Could you describe my Old Kentucky Home?" How would you describe it?
I'm going to be honest. You know, the first thing I think of is being at a basketball game or a UK football game and singing My Old Kentucky Home.
Yes.
I've been down there several times and kind of took the tour, and you know, I think it's really pristine the way they've maintained the property and the house and everything. And It's a really neat place to go to.
Do you think that creates an image for our state?
Oh, I think it does.
Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about
that southern antebellum kind of
exactly. We're gonna talk about that a little bit, get into it, but let's talk about the guy that built the house, the guy that owned the house, the guy that his family came from Pennsylvania, York County, Pennsylvania. He was born in like 1773. Now, after the Revolutionary War, there was...
Well, who was the guy?
John Rowan.
John Rowan. Okay.
Yes. The Rowan family fell on hard times after the Revolutionary War. Now, after a lot of wars, I have noticed there is economic hard times, and I'm not smart enough to understand why, but that has happened. And so they came to Kentucky to get a fresh start. They came to start anew. Now, I don't know how that works, but they started and got off at a fast pace, evidently, because in a few years, these people became one of the wealthiest families in Kentucky. And I'm not sure how that happened.
And that's
I would
the
love
American
to know.
story.
Yes.
I mean, that's the American dream right there.
They ended up in Bardstown. One of the reasons they chose Bardstown. Now, this is how these people thought. There was a school there, an academy called Priestley Academy. And Dr. James Priestley had quite a reputation for having a really, really great school. So they entered young John Rowan and his 4 siblings in this school, and so they would have a good education. That was very important to them, as it is today. But you know, you would not think in that primitive conditions, first of all, there would be a really great school there, and second of all, that was a high priority for them coming out of the situation that they came from. Now, some of his early classmates are like a who's who of early Kentucky. And I know most people, probably unless you're really deep into Kentucky history, probably don't know these names. But we're going to come back to a few of them later. But James Talbot, John Pope, Jesse Bledsoe, Solomon Sharp, William T. Berry, Robert Wycliffe, Joseph Hamilton Davies, Felix Grundy, John Allen, and Archibald Cameron. All these people had successful lives and notable people, and to most of us that, to people that are really not into history, but if you Googled any of these names, you would come up with a pretty remarkable life.
Right.
But there's also another twist to this we're going to get to. It's going to take a turn. We're going to take a turn, and I'm going to come back to some of these names. From there, he got his elementary education there, and then he went on to Lexington, where he was taught law under George Nicholas. Now, George Nicholas was the one that taught Henry Clay, and I think he was at Transylvania. The information I have did not say, but Transylvania was more noted as a medical school than a law school, but maybe he did, maybe it was Transylvania. But anyway, he was in Lexington, and he received his law degree in 1795. He was 22 years old.
Wow.
So he started practicing law at 22. And in 1799, he went to Frankfort as a member of the Constitutional Convention, which was around that time. And he had already had some law practice. He had already made his name known. And he started building what we know today as my old Kentucky home. The house, if those that haven't been there, this is a big stately brick home. It's built in what we call the federal style of architecture, thus the name Federal Hill. This house was not just a house. This house became a popular place. Now, I'm not sure how he managed to pull this off, but I know that it was a list of who's who of people that came and stayed at that house. Now, in early Kentucky, we didn't have motels, hotels. We didn't have places for people to stay. So, it wasn't unusual that travelers stayed in houses and rented rooms and so forth. But this was a little different. Foreign dignitaries stayed there. Travelers that we call of distinction. People, that the who's who in the political and entertainers, people in the theater. And he would almost pay, like if there was a real well-known Shakespearean actor that came to town, Judge Rowan would pay and put him up at his house just so he would be there, so that people would get a chance to meet him.
Yeah.
So he's a pretty sharp guy, pretty smart. He became very affluent. How? We don't know. I really just don't know. But he entered the political scene. He was known, the house became pretty much known not only just in Kentucky, but all over the country.
Yeah.
There was a culture that created and an image created by this. And that was something that was becoming one of the things about this house that we enter at the end of the story, Stephen Collins Foster. Now, Stephen Foster was a cousin to John Rowan.
Okay.
The information that I have said that he was a cousin, and Stephen Foster was not a native Kentuckian. He was born around in a little village close to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And in 1826, he came to visit his cousin at the Federal Hill there, and he was absolutely enthralled at the beautiful grounds, the way the house was, the way of life. It wasn't just a house; it was a way of life.
Right.
He was enthralled by the majesty of the grounds. He was amazed at you know that, I don't know if people know this or not, but there is just about every known species of tree in Kentucky planted on that.
That's native to Kentucky.
That's native to Kentucky.
You know, yeah. I never realized that.
And gardens, flowers, there was just all kinds of things that made the place just special and beautiful. And again, people of influence, people who had money, they could accomplish these things.
Right.
His visits seemed to inspire him in a way that he actually honeymooned there in 1852. He started to come more and more often as he could. I think he would have liked to have lived there. I don't know why he didn't, but so they shared he shared a vision that I think is remarkable in this story. Now, it's one thing for us to go to a place and enjoy it and like it, but it's another thing to sit down and have deep emotions about it. And to write a song like My Old Kentucky Home, you had to have deep emotional connection.
Some kind of spiritual connection to where you were at.
Right.
Yeah.
And he wanted to express this in the most idyllic image that he could, and his method of doing it was through music. And now, they were at a party one night, and it was a lot of young people, and they were dancing. John Rowan II was a young man then, and they were having a good time, and he had written this song, evidently. He had all this on his heart and on his mind, so he had sat down and he'd written several scores on rough draft, and he sat down with this young lady, and she encouraged him to sit down with her at the piano and try to put it together, in a song.
Right. And
he did. And everybody just they stopped what they were doing. It was like, they listened to that and it was like, wow, that's really good. That kind of hit a chord with people. Within a few months, he had published a song, and within a year, it spread all across the United States. It was probably one of Stephen Foster's more popular songs. It was said that Stephen Foster composed songs while wandering through the fields playing his flute.
Huh.
He would he would wander through the fields and watch the servants work, and they said he would stop and sit down under a tree and play a flute, or sit out in the middle of a cornfield, or he sit by a garden, go down and sit by a stream. He was really inspired by that place, and we don't know how many other songs that he wrote.
Was he already a well-known musician or author, songwriter at this time?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I think he became,
because of the My Old Kentucky
Home and others. Was Old Susanna, and I don't know how many other. Yeah. There's several. I'm not.
But at this time he wasn't. He was just. I
don't think so. Okay. Not yet. But about the 1850s and 60s he was.
Okay.
For some reason, the place just absolutely inspired him. Now, a cloud started forming. If you're ever out in the country and you're working, you're not really paying attention to the weather, and you look up, and back then people would get caught out in storms and everything. Well, there was a cloud forming over Kentucky, and it was called the issue of slavery, issue of states' rights. Kentucky caught right in the middle of the North and the South, trying to stay neutral, and he
Kentucky really was, I mean, they were neutral as a whole officially, but there was sections or regions of the state that identified with the North
Exactly.
and the South.
Exactly.
So,
yeah, the slaveholder, Western Kentucky was more Confederate. The Eastern Kentucky was more Union, didn't have slaves. The poorer sections of Kentucky did not have slaves, so therefore they did not see it the way that the people that had slaves. And
so they were really a state divided.
Oh, very, very much so. And then there was families divided.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm sure, you know, it's probably the being sitting on a fence is worse than being on either side.
Yeah.
And you know, Governor McGoffin tried to declare neutrality, and President Lincoln told him, said, "You're either for us or you're against us. There's no such thing."
Yeah.
And so that's kind of.
And both presidents were born
in
Kentucky,
yes.
which is kind of
not that many miles apart.
Yeah.
So it's that old problem that hung over Kentucky for so long. So he decided to go back to Pennsylvania during the war. Sir Walter Scott wrote. I mean, you know, he said that a man. Excuse me. Let me. Breathes there the man with a son so dread who never himself has said, "'Tis my own, my native land." And when Stephen Foster left Kentucky, he left with a very sad heart, that because he saw what was coming. He knew that what he had written about and the life that the Rowans had lived and the passionate things that he had written about was probably gone with the wind, just like the movie.
Yeah.
He knew that would be a change would come. So now we're going to take a twist of this story. It's going to change dramatically here. We're going to move from Stephen Foster to the darker side of my old Kentucky home.
Okay.
A lot of people don't know this story part about my old Kentucky home. Dr. Rowan was a, very proud and educated man, well known politically. He was a congressman, served in several capacities. But there was another young man in Bardstown that was very successful too, and his name was Dr. James Chambers. He was a handsome young surgeon and physician. His father-in-law was Judge James Sebastian, and he was on the Kentucky Court of Appeals. Now, the cloud that hung over Dr. Chambers was that his father-in-law was caught up in as one of the Spanish conspirators that had accepted a $2,000 a year payment from the Spanish government to influence laws passed and the western expansion and travel up and down the Mississippi River by the Spanish. They wanted to control the rivers, to control trade on the river, and he was basically one of those that had been
sold out.
Yeah. And it's quite the scandal of that time, to be honest with you. We will get into it because we don't have time for it. But on January the 29th, 1801, John Rowan and Dr. Chambers and some others met upstairs in the room of the Duncan McLean's Tavern in Bardstown. Now, I'm pretty sure that building is still standing, and it's right on the square in Bardstown. I'm pretty sure it is. They were there for a round of beer drinking and card playing. See any problem with that, Brian?
That was common in those days,
Well, the two of them had ordered a gallon of strong beer, which they drank before they went upstairs to play cards. Now, it was said that they were getting pretty well on their way before they even went upstairs. And they played a game called, now I don't know how to pronounce it, it's Vigutun, Vigutun.
Yeah, that's a new one on me.
Or 21, which I think today we call blackjack.
Blackjack, yeah.
Okay. So as the game progressed, Judge Rowan won $11.50 on credit.
These guys are some real whales.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Here's a guy who owns 2,000 acres of land, but he didn't have $11.50.
Yeah.
From, I guess maybe that time that was maybe a sizable amount of money. I don't know. He'd won it from Dr. Chambers, besides several gourds of beer. So the doctor became a little bit irritated as his bad luck seemed to get worse as the night went. So he began to question. He asked a bystander which didn't sit well with Dr. Rowan, if he would just kind of watch and keep score and keep track of things, because he didn't think this thing was going right. And as Judge Rowan became more intoxicated, he began to flash his cards around that he carried, and he said, "Damn you, doctor, give me a card." He started, and here we go.
Yeah.
And as it began to escalate, the judge and the doctor began to argue. Now, don't you listen? Again, you can't make this stuff up. If I was making up a story, I couldn't make this up. They began to argue to which understood some of the dead languages the best. Brian, what's a dead language?
Oh, it's a language that's no longer spoken.
I can't imagine. I mean, these were really educated people, so they had evidently had some education in, quote, dead languages.
Yeah.
So maybe some of our listeners can
And unfortunately, there's people going into debt with hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt to go to college to learn these dead languages.
Well, and then they started this thing about one was vastly inferior to the other.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got this big pride problem here going on, big time. And Judge Rowan jumped up and called the doctor a damn liar, and the doctor responded by collaring him around the neck, and it said that he was superior to Rowan, and he said, "I'll be damned if you are," and Dr. Chambers says, "I'll be damned if I'm not." So here we go. And according to a witness, each asserted his superiority with warmth and vigor. Thus the fight broke out, several punches thrown, and it said that the judge hit the chimney wall so many times he dislocated his thumb. and they got him broke up, and it was, I can just see this scene, and you're probably in some pretty tight corners in some of these old buildings, and they, they was banging against the walls and everything. When the belligerent linguistics were separated, they found that Dr. Rowan had his thumb broke, and Dr. Chambers had scratches and bruises all over him, but seemed to be the better of the two. And he then called Rowan. He said, "This is a good example that you are a coward." So Rowan shouted, "Whoever says so is a liar and a damn fool and a rascal."
Such harsh words.
Yes. Oh, yes. At this point, the doctor threatened to publish him as a coward in the newspapers in Kentucky. Now, let's talk about that just a second. When you challenge, there's this thing about their pride. This was such a important thing to them. And I think Stuart Sanders in his book, Murder on the High Bill, remember how he talked about how that it was so important to people that day. And I guess it's still important to us today, but I mean, they carried it to the maximum of how people looked at them, how their community viewed them was more important to them than their life.
Yeah.
And so when you published a statement calling someone a coward or whatever in a newspaper, that was like a slap in the face challenge to a duel.
Yeah.
So this is where this is headed, as we can see. 2 days after the brawl, Chambers challenged Rowan to a duel and named the time and the place and the method. And Rowan accepted. And now Rowan had selected, 2 guys to be his seconds. Now, for those that aren't familiar with dueling, and I'm no expert in it by any means, but what would happen would be you would challenge a guy, you would send him a note, he would accept it, send you a note back. He would then select his second or seconds. Now, these seconds were important. In other words, they were the guys that stood on the side. First of all, if you got wounded, they would be there to take care of you. Second of all, they were also carrying a gun, and they were to enforce the rules, the code of duel. And so their seconds was, as a guy, he's got to have some courage too. He's got to be willing to put his life on the line for you. So it had to be a good, dear friend, loyal person. And sometimes they had more than one. Sometimes they would have 2 in case the other guy had 2.
Yeah.
But these guys did not cheat, so to speak. They pretty much wanted to show their courage by accepting this duel. So the judge that Rowan selected was Judge George M. Bibb, and he didn't have to be a judge. Excuse my double talk there. But now, of all people, this was a family that invented Bibb lettuce. Did you know that?
No, I did not.
Well, there's that uncommon history part. And from Frankfort, Kentucky, if you go downtown Frankfort and you go down near the Orlando Brown House and some of that area, the old part of Frankfort, you will see a sign up about Bibb and the inventor of Bibb lettuce.
I had no idea.
Isn't that wild?
I had no idea about that.
He also selected a guy that was, what was his name? He was a U.S. Senator. I'm sorry, I think I missed his name. Under President Tyler, it was another fellow. So Judge Rowan had two guys. Dr. Chambers selected a fellow by the name of Major John Bullock of Nelson County. So they're getting ready here to have it out over dead languages.
Yeah.
Who's the best at dead languages?
I can't believe they're going to fight to the death over dead languages.
This gets better. Okay,
you know, if it was a woman or something like that, I could probably understand over dead languages.
No.
A cow, you know, you stole my cow or
No.
my pig, maybe not dead languages.
It's more important here.
Yeah.
This challenges my education ability. Educational. All right. Friends of both parties tried to mediate, and you know they tried to talk to him and talk some sense into him, obviously, to avoid bloodshed. I mean, there was ways that you could, you know, say, look, you know, I apologize, whatever. Neither one of them would take the first step toward that. So they even offered to negotiate. How much you listen? They even offered to negotiate a dead language contest, and I'm not kidding, on the dueling grounds, and have an impartial judge come in to decide who was the best at dead languages.
And people think Kentucky's backwards.
Can you imagine meeting on dueling grounds? Can you just picture this in your mind? Meeting on a dueling grounds, the two guys get out, take their coats off. You think you're going to get pistols, and all of a sudden you start talking about dead languages?
Well, I challenge anybody listening to pick any other state that's had a duel over dead languages.
Yes, please tell us. We'd like to know. The seconds met in Joshua Wilson's Tavern, and they planned the duel. Now, there's a little bit more of this than meets the eye. So on February the 3rd, 1801, on the Beach Fork River just south of Bardstown. Now, I can show you where this happened. And actually, there's a historic marker up there unless they moved it. It's right across, there's a bridge as you go out. Oh, gee, I've gotten in trouble. I can't tell you the road. But it runs south of Bardstown, and right before you get it over the Beach Fork River, if you look to your left, you will see a historic marker. And right in that bottom, right there by that bridge is where this happened.
Wow.
So they were out there at daylight, and they had to wait till the fog lifted. Can you just see this picture? I mean, wouldn't that be a great movie scene?
It would.
Okay, you're out there as soon as the sun comes up. They're out there. The birds are chirping, a peaceful, tranquil setting. These guys are one of them's about to die.
Right.
So they waited for the fog lifted. The place was owned by a fellow by the name of Jacob Yoder, and he was a plantation. And he come into play a little bit later in this story too, after this duel. I'm not sure I understand how they picked that spot, but he definitely did not like John Rowan. Once again, the seconds tried to intervene. You know, this is probably the responsibility of all rational people is, right. You know, this is not worth dying for. Judge Bibb brought a brace of Rowan's pistols. Rowan furnished the dueling pistols. And he presented them to be inspected, and they both looked at them and accepted them, and they were loaded. And they were to stand 10 paces back to back from each other. They would move out 10 paces, stand back to back, and as soon as the word was given, they were to turn and fire. Probably they didn't walk and then turn and fire. They walked and stood still, and they said fire, and they would turn and fire. The seconds again were standing there with loaded pistols to make sure that no cheating happened or anything. So they took their coats off, they took their positions on the field, and they turned and they fired. And both missed. So now there's an opportunity. Okay, there's an opportunity to say, hey, okay, both you guys have shown you're not cowards, you're not afraid to call us through. So let's just call us off now. You both can say you're both winners.
Right.
You know, but no. This dead languages was way too important. I mean, this is just way too important. and actually it wasn't about the dead languages, so to speak. But anyway, so on the second fire, Dr. Chambers hit the ground immediately. The bullet entered right into his ribs under his left arm, and anytime in that era when a bullet hits you there, you're done. Judge Rowan walked over to him and asked if he had any further need of him. If he didn't, he would leave the field, in which he did. And immediately, Rowan expressed sympathy for Dr. Chambers and regretted his actions, almost immediately. Dr. Chambers was taken to his home to die. There was a doctor called, and there's a little more of that story, but anyway, the sum of it was. Now, Dr. Chambers was a popular guy, and then this excited a mob. You know, I don't care who you are, that you probably have, and you're very public like these guys were, you're going to have friends and you're going to have detractors. Well, I'm sure Judge Rowan had his detractors as well. And this was an opportunity for them.
Make an issue.
So they cited a mob in Bardstown, and so they were going to go out and lynch him. And Judge Rowan saw them coming. He suspicioned, you know, he'd probably gotten word. I mean, I'm sure there's more of this than we know. But so he took one of his servants and put his hat and coat on him and put him on a horse, and he waited till the mob could see him, and he sent this servant away riding his horse. And so they went after him thinking that was him. So then he went and hid out in some neighboring cliffs around his house there until things calmed down. The popular opinion was kind of against him. Yeah, it didn't sit well with people. And but it's really interesting how this plays out. Now, Dr. Chambers died the next morning from the gunshot. Ugly rumors started immediately that Rowan had cheated, that he'd used his pistols and they had a hair trigger, and that Rowan had heavy paper under his clothes to ward off the bullets. After a few days, Rowan was arrested by the local sheriff and charged with murder. Although there were laws against dueling, now listen to this, Brian. The judge said that Rowan acted brave, gentlemanly, and honorably, and threw it out and said there was no evidence to hold him as a case to a grand jury. That's almost hard to believe, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you had witnesses, unless the witnesses
are not
willing to testify.
Obviously political.
Yeah.
I mean, you know.
Yeah.
It's almost dumbfounding, and nothing come of it. That's the end of it. However, of course, he had to live with that on his conscience, which, you know, may be worse than the punishment he would receive, or whatever. But
no one started over a dead language. And
he went on to live a reasonably long life. Great prominence. Was judge on the Court of Appeals in 1838. He was president of the Kentucky Historical Society. He was Secretary of State in 1804. Elected to the Kentucky Legislature in 1824. So old wounds heal. Yeah. You know, evidently. Judge Rowan figured in many prominent Kentucky murder trials as well. Can you imagine?
Well, he would have first-hand knowledge. So.
I mean, you know, he was in several, and I didn't go through all that list because I didn't want to you know, that gets kind of boring.
Right.
He moved from Federal Hill in 1823, not having anything to do with anything, but he moved to Louisville, and his son took over Federal Hill. And he lived in Louisville until July the 13th of 1843. He died, he was 70 years old. And his legacy isn't so much about the duel. It's not so much his political career, but his legacy at Federal Hill is most known for My Old Kentucky Home, the song. And the little second part of this is that he wrote his will many years later, after the duel, and he never, you know, he never forgot that. And he in his will he bequeathed his pistols to his son, and he said they are never to be used by either. Now I don't understand what by either means, but when their honor imperiously demands it, and in the case I knew they will be held steady. So
he's kind of reflecting back on when he had to use use them for his honor, defend his honor.
Well, guess what?
What's that?
Young John was in a duel too.
Really?
Yes. Yes. And he was in a duel with Thomas Marshall. And I'm not sure, and I didn't get into the details of this duel, but his sweetheart, Rebecca Carnes, John Rowan Jr.'s sweetheart that they would eventually marry, she demanded that he not kill him. That she did not want him to shoot him to kill him. So he fought the duel and he shot the guy in the hip, and which made him a cripple for the rest of his life.
Wow.
So that is the story of my old Kentucky home and the Rowan family.
Well, that was a really good one. So just a reminder, don't forget the downtownperryville.com, October 8th and 9th, the 160th celebration of the Perryville Battle. You can find us on Uncommon History on Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. We also have a webpage, uncommonhistory.us. And we thank you. And Uncommon History is produced by Harold Edwards and Brian Wolford. So for those if you're still watching on TikTok, we actually have a new Uncommon History TikTok page. If you would go over and follow us, and once we get to 1,000 on it, we'll be doing our live broadcasts of our podcast on it instead of my personal one.